Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and a brand new video. In this week's video, we will be taking a look at how I made this red oak dining tabletop. It's made from 6/4 rough sawn lumber, and I'll be walking you through the process of how I put this tabletop together, as well as giving you some tips and pointers in case you don't have some of the machinery that you see in this video. And with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first step in the build process is to cut all the boards to a manageable length. These are 14-foot rough sawn boards. And I don't know about you, but at least in my opinion, 14 feet is a bit large for a dining table. So I cut these a little under 8 feet long with the miter saw. This tabletop will be 8 feet long when it's finished, but we are going to add breadboards on the end. But for now, we want to leave a little extra length, which we will take care of later on in the video. So these boards are random widths from the sawmill, and so in order to make them a little more manageable and easier for me to handle, I'll be using the track saw to rip those boards right down the middle to even more random widths. But like I said, I just want to get them to where they're a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, and easier to work with. Now typically in the milling process, you will begin on the joiner and joint one face, then joint one edge, but I'm going to take the lazy approach to this and just plane both sides and see how this turns out. In some instances, such as on this tabletop, you will be able to get away with just planing both surfaces rather than face joining one surface. But you'll still need to joint one edge before ripping the other edge off on the table saw to make sure that everything is squared up to those faces that you planed. So this tabletop will end up just shy of 40 inches wide, and since I have a 20-inch planer, I'll be doing the glue up for the top in two different sections. Now I strategically ripped each board to where each panel would be about 19 3/4 inches, so if my glue up seams don't line up perfectly, then I can smooth that out with the planer. Now I realize that a 20-inch planer is not something that is in every single shop, so if you don't have a wider planer like that, you can use biscuits, dowels, or dominoes to help with the alignment of the boards. In my experience, it's hard to beat using bar clamps for tabletop glue ups, so get as many bar clamps as you can or you have, and alternate them underneath and over top of the tabletop like you can see here. Another tip is to take any cutoff pieces and put between the actual tabletop and that bar clamp. That way the clamp won't dig into the edge of the tabletop. These Craig clamps are awesome for reaching an inside board and clamping it down to align with the others in case there is any misalignment. If you don't have that clamp, you can use your body weight to help position the boards in place and make sure that they are all lined up. I do this pretty frequently actually, but just edit it out in the footage. As far as tightening the clamps go, start on one end and work your way down to the other end, tightening one clamp at a time, which makes the alignment of the boards much easier to control. Finally, be sure to take a wet rag and clean up any of those glue seams because any dried glue will show whenever you stain the tabletop later on. It's probably overkill, but I like to leave the clamps on for 24 hours or so, or sometime until the next day. And then I can take each panel over to the planer to clean up all the glue seams and the rough edges. Now again, I realize that a 20-inch planer is not the most common tool, so of course this step can be skipped and you can use a hand plane, a hand planer, drum sander, belt sander, or just a regular orbital sander to get those seams out. And there is nothing wrong whatsoever with doing it that way, just having the bigger planer helps me to speed things up. So essentially what I have here, rather than two panels, are just two giant boards, and I'll be joining these together in the middle using dominoes to make sure that I get that middle seam aligned, because I obviously can't fit this through my planer. The dominoes here are for alignment purposes rather than strength. The strength will come from that glue joint, so the dominoes are just marked for consistency to keep that middle seam aligned. If you don't have a domino, you can do the exact same thing with a biscuit joiner or a doweling jig, both of which I have used in the past with excellent results. Not only on this middle seam, but on every single seam, you want to make sure that you have glue coverage on the entire joint. So you'll often see me using these glue paintbrushes, which can be picked up for a couple bucks at the hardware store. Whenever doing these glue ups, you don't need to work so fast that you feel out of control, but you do want to do this quickly because that glue will begin to set up in maybe 10 or 15 minutes. It takes a few hours for it to cure and dry, but once you start the process, you need to be committed and finish that glue up in one step. So again, for this middle seam, we will alternate the bar clamps between the top and the bottom. And I like to grab a level or a straight edge to make sure that that top does sit flat whenever I tighten the clamps up. Next up for the tabletop was to add the breadboards, and I just did an entire video going into a lot of detail on how I did these breadboard ends. So rather than repeat all the information in that video, I'll leave a link at the top of the screen that you can click and check out that video, which will give a better understanding of how the domino style breadboards are attached to the ends of this tabletop. To summarize, however, I used the domino to cut mortises on both the breadboard and the tabletop, and I made my own tenons and cut elongated slots in those tenons to allow for wood movement. The breadboard is then hammered into place and pinned into place in drawbore fashion using dowel rods. So again, be sure to check out that other video, which will give a much better explanation than we have time for in this video. After those breadboards are flush cut with the track saw, it's time for everybody's favorite part, which is sanding. I won't bore you to death with going into details of sanding, but I do slowly work up through the grain, starting with 80, 120, 180, and then finally 220. On my tabletops, I like to use a round over bit on the top side, and then I don't think I showed it, but I will flip this table over and use a chamfer bit just to take that sharp edge off on the underside. I'll sand the top one last time to take out any of the marks left by the router, and then here is the end result of the tabletop. This is one of the best tops I've done, and I thought it turned out fantastic. But drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. Also be sure to stay tuned for the next video, which will show how I stained this black and finished it with a polyurethane gloss finish. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and as always, stay tuned for more.